you can see I kind of get like this like yellowish to pink fall off here. If I hold down the B key and then middle mouse drag, we get like this fall off of what we want to move when we select that vertex. So if I move that now, we get like a nicer organic kind of move. So like when you're modeling, typically you would use soft select with the B key, because otherwise it's really hard to kind of come in and just kind of move things in a nice way one by one like that. So that's vertices. If I right click again and go to edge, now we're working with an edge, which an edge just connects two vertices. So if you move an edge, it's the same as moving two vertices. So you can see that. And again, I could toggle the soft select and do the same thing. You could hold down shift and add more edges to your selection. So if I turn off my soft select, you'll be able to see that I have these 3 edges selected at once. Now, if I double click, I didn't show this during the class, but if I double click on an edge, oops, try that again, double click, it selects a whole loop of edges that go around the object. This is really cool because let's say if I wanted to move all these edges here kind of up or down, I would double click on one of those edges and you could, bunch these together, or you can move them like that. And same thing with these going the other direction, double click and you could, change your shape like that or get some wonky thing like this. That's edges. Now if I right click again and go to face, now we're selecting a polygonal face, which consists of 4 edges or 4 vertices. So if I click that, it's like selecting those 4 vertices or those 4 edges. And it's just a little bit easier to work with if you kind of want to get like broader strokes kind of thing. And if I hold down or toggle the B key on my keyboard again, we get the soft select as well. And we're going to get into organic modeling in another class. I just wanted to give you an idea of the components that make up a polygon. So we have vertices, we have edges, which is just one edge is just 2 vertices. And then we have a face, and typically faces are made up of 4 edges. Sometimes you could get 3-sided here, like on this sphere down here. We have a bunch of 3-sided faces. Typically, we try to stay away from that in models, but like in this sphere example, we get a 3-sided face, or sometimes you can have, a 5-sided face or whatever. All right, and let's say you're zoomed in or you're like way lost and you're like, how do I get my stuff back? I'm panning around and I don't see my objects. If you hit the A key on your keyboard, it'll frame everything in your scene within your camera. Now, if you tap the space bar, for some reason it doesn't work with my screen recorder, but if you tap that, it's going to change and you'll see this. It'll basically do the same thing as if I hit this button over here. So on the left, we have these different viewport configurations. We have the perspective view, and then we have this like 4 view setup. So we have the perspective, we have a top view, a front view, and a side view. So the perspective has perspective, and if an object gets farther away, like if I move this off, oops, let me go back. So if I right click and go to object mode, now I could select the whole object and actually move it and not just move vertices. So if I move this off into space, it gets smaller, and if I move it closer, it gets bigger. That's because it's perspective. But let's say if I move it, let's see here in the front view, we're still moving it, but it stays the same size. It looks like it hasn't moved at all. And the reason is that these are orthographic viewports. So if I, let me go to Photoshop and show you that. So here in Photoshop, I have this fun little markup that I made with my mouse. It's a very bad drawing. But the way this works is you have your 3D camera, which is your perspective camera. And then let's say we have two objects. And then we actually have a virtual piece of film behind the camera, like a film back. And the way this works is, let's say the computer is going to render this scene with this sphere here and this sphere up here. It would actually trace a line from here. Let me see if I could do this like kind of correctly. Let me try over here. It'll basically kind of run these points through your camera lens and then onto that film back. So then let's say from here, this is not working out good. Hang on a second. I'm just gonna like kind of freehand draw it, but you get the idea. It kind of draws like that. This is very horrible. And then it would kind of come over here, and actually this would be off the screen there. And this guy would come down through the lens and end up here on your film back, and then you get the idea, kind of like that. So this is how you get like that perspective, and like how this one would be smaller than this one, let's say. Now with the orthographic view, there is no camera, so you could kind of scratch this camera out and it would just draw the shape straight like this to the film back. Like that. And so no matter if this is like, 100 units off in the distance, it's going to still look the same size as this one here. So that's how an orthographic versus perspective view actually works. All right, back to Maya. All right, cool. So we have our outliner, we have our perspective view, and if I want to go back to my perspective view, or pretty much you can maximize any of these views by putting your mouse in one of those views and then tapping the space bar and it'll maximize it. However, again, my screen recorder messes up when I try that, so I'm going to just click on this perspective view here, and that'll maximize the perspective view. And again, I could tumble around. And then in my outliner, here's where I would, name my object. So I would double click and I would call this like spaceship or whatever. And this would be, I don't know, alien something, right? So that's how you kind of organize your scene, is you have your outliner, you want to name your objects, and you could also delete them. So if you click on one, you could just hit backspace or delete and they disappear. Just like that. Oops, this one didn't disappear. Okay, there we go. The next thing I want to show is transforms versus the actual shape node. So in Maya, everything is controlled by nodes, and a node is just like an object. Like I made that sphere, that's a node. So if I go back and create the sphere, I have the transform, which stores all the XYZ and rotational and scale information. Then I have the shape, which has the vertices and the faces and the edges. And you could actually visualize that in the outliner. If I go to display, I could turn on shapes. So now there's a plus sign next to this sphere. So now we have this little hierarchy. The shape is a child of the sphere. So wherever I move this transform, my shape follows. However, if I right click here and go to vertex, let's say, and just select all the vertices and move those away. Now when I go back to object mode, right click, go back to object mode, the pivot point for this object is where we left it out in space, but the shape is over here now. So the transform never moved, only the shape moved. So now if I select this sphere and go to rotate it, it's going to rotate from here because that's where the transform is. So the